All right, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the fight, one of the biggest fights possibly that's ever going to happen in fight history. We thought about it. Me and Casper sat down and we thought, who is the man that we're going to invite to talk about this? Who is the man who is going to vibe and discuss how we really feel about what could be one of the most historic moments in combat history? And while we thought about it, only one name came to mind. We thought about buffets. We thought about turkey skin. We thought about a man that has delivered time and time again on Submission Radio, back to back to back to back. There's only one man who we thought of, and that is, of course, Damon Martin from Fox Sports. Of course, you know his amazing work. He joins us back here on the program. Damon, welcome to Submission Radio.
With that kind of an intro, you're talking about the biggest fight ever. That's like the best intro I've ever had. So I don't know if I can top that by what I'm about to say over the next, however long we're going to talk.
Look, Damon, stakes are higher now. Things have changed. I'm not going to lie about it. So there's a lot to discuss. And the first thing I want to kick things off with, of course, the historic fight, Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor. This fight is now official. It's going down in August. People can put it in their diaries. Everybody's been obsessing about the fact and how quickly it came together and if people are surprised that it happened. But my first question to you, Damon, is now that it's made official, are you a fan of this fight happening?
Yeah, I'm a fan of it happening, because listen, at the end of the day, we want to talk about sport and we want to talk about the best fights possible. And I agree with all of that. But at the same time, there is still an entertainment value to all of this. There is a show to all of this. There's a spectacle to all of this. And as much as all of us want to see great fights, and we all do want to see great fights, that's why we're here. But we also want to see a great show. And there's no better showman in our sport than Conor McGregor. So there is an interesting factor to this fight. There is an intriguing factor to this fight, and there is a show factor to this fight that we've never seen before, ever in the history of sports, much less boxing or mixed martial arts. Never has this happened in any sport. So, yeah, I'm on board with the fight. It's going to be interesting. I mean, listen, I'm just as excited for the press conferences right now as I am the fight itself, but 2 hours after this fight was booked, I already booked my travel to Las Vegas. I had my hotel done. I booked everything immediately because I know it's going to be a circus. And, there's something intriguing about a circus. Everyone likes the circus. So, let's go. Let's just do it.
I love it. I love how you're able to just buy flights and accommodations straight away. I wish flying from Australia to Vegas wasn't so expensive so we could do that as well. In terms of the fight, there are definitely things that I like about it. Look, it's not so much the fight on 26th of August that I'm interested in. I think that the bigger fight has already been fought, and what happens on August 26th is really going to be a culmination of that. And I think the big fight was Conor McGregor versus the UFC, something that's been brewing for a very, very long time. People have been talking about the power struggle between Conor McGregor, between Dana White, between the Fertittas. And it's always come back to Conor McGregor. What are his limits? What is his ceiling? Is he getting too big for his boots? Is he going to put the UFC in some kind of uncomfortable position? People are talking about, is he going to co-promote with the UFC? Is he going to be a part owner? All these kinds of things. After UFC 205, when he held both belts, people were saying, gee, what are his limits now? What is he going to be able to accomplish? Is he going to take over the UFC? And in a time of unrest, in a time of fighters being unhappy with the conditions, with the respect, with their treatment, with their pay, with all these things, I love seeing that one guy has come out on top, and that is Conor McGregor. He single-handedly, I mean, he was on welfare a matter of years ago, and a few years later, he single-handedly enticed one of the highest-paid, most famous athletes in the world, in Floyd Mayweather, to want to do business with him, to want to put together a fight that is completely unnatural from his natural field, which is mixed martial arts. They're going to do a boxing match, and hearing that a year or 2 years ago, you would think that it's nonsense. The UFC would never allow that. People started talking about the Ali Act and maybe if Conor McGregor did this or that. And here he is. He twisted the UFC's arm. He bent them over. He spanked them. This is one of the best negotiations I've ever seen. Easily the best negotiation from a fighter as far as a fighter going up against the UFC. He went up against them, and he won. There was no lawsuit, no legal troubles. The UFC realized this is what they have to do, and they did it. And Leonard Ellaby and Dana White are selling us this whole spiel about how, this is the fight that the fans wanted. The fans didn't want the fight. It's not that the fans wanted it. The fans wanted to know whether it was happening or not. And now they're going with that narrative. Now they know that it's happening, and it's happening purely because Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather put the UFC in a position where it would have been stupid to do anything but make this fight. So I don't think it's going to really add anything to Floyd Mayweather's accomplishments. He's 49-0 against the best boxers in the world. What is beating Conor McGregor going to do for him? This is a real story about Conor McGregor going up against the UFC and winning. So I like it in that sense. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah. I mean, look, a lot of people are out there and they're talking about how this is a travesty and how it's going to be a terrible fight and why would anybody tune in? But I'm actually really excited for this because, first of all the stories that you said leading into it, Casper, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts in a sec, Damon. They're very interesting to me as well. To me, the other story here is Floyd Mayweather, pay-per-view king. He now has an opportunity to fight another guy who a lot of people believe took the throne away from him and became the new pay-per-view king. So now you got him going back into relevance. I guess a lot of people could say he wasn't any longer relevant anymore in the game. People sort of thought the game passed him by a little bit and sort of moved on to Conor McGregor. Here is his chance to beat Conor McGregor. And if he does beat Conor McGregor, which, I mean, the chances are very, very high, he has something that he can say. Not only is it a 50-0 thing, which I guarantee to you 50-0 means a lot to him. I mean, he's 49-0, even though it's going to be a win over Conor McGregor. To him, being 50-0, that's going to be a huge thing for him. He's going to be talking about that till the cows come home after the fight if it does happen. But the other thing to him would be, I took on the pay-per-view king at 40 years old, and I was able to beat him, and I was able to stay relevant and come back into the spotlight and have the hottest, biggest fight out there. And as a promoter, as someone who has Mayweather Promotions, that is a big thing for him. The reason why Oscar De La Hoya and a lot of these guys are upset about the sport, about this fight happening, partly a lot of people say it's bad for boxing. I don't agree. I actually think it's good for boxing because a lot of people are interested in boxing, and there's some hot fights happening this year. I think the more people watch boxing, the undercard, the other fighters on there take notice of boxing, actually get into the whole process of watching boxing. It's good for boxing in general because a lot of people weren't doing that. But apart from that, I mean, a lot of those promoters are just upset because they don't have the relevant fight right now. Mayweather Promotions or Floyd Mayweather Showtime, they have the relevant fight right now. This is the fight that everybody's talking about. So you got a guy that went from this Pacquiao fight, he was super relevant, huge fight, and then you kind of thought, well, where are you going to go from that? No one really in boxing for him to fight where everybody's going to tune in. We all saw, Manny Pacquiao, he's fighting in Brisbane against Jeff Horn. No one is even talking about that fight. So for him to stay in relevance, I think that's a big story going in there, and also being able to add that to his legacy, fighting Conor McGregor. But Damon, I'm just curious, what do you think it really is on the line here? Because there's a lot of money. Both men are going to come out of this super wealthy. So money aside, what is at stake here for Conor McGregor? What is at stake here for Floyd Mayweather if we're really looking at what's going to happen once this fight is done in August?
Well, for Floyd Mayweather, you already mentioned it. I mean, it's a chance to go 50-0 to tie Rocky Marciano's record, for the undefeated record in boxing, and, become, that's a mark. I mean, 50-0, it's incredible. It's a ridiculous mark. And yes, there will be some that will try to take that away from him by saying he beat 0-0, mixed martial artists to do it. But it's still, I mean, listen, there's no fight in boxing that would get Mayweather what he's going to get out of this fight. And maybe that's also because there's less danger in theory in this fight than fighting a Triple G or a Canelo rematch or any of those kind of fights. But at the end of the day, he could fight Canelo 10 more times and it wouldn't make as much money as this one. He could fight, Triple G, and it wouldn't make anywhere near what this one's going to make. So there is that kind of twofold element to this. He gets his 50th win, and he gets a lot of money out of it. For Conor McGregor, I think it actually does more for Conor McGregor because it puts him on an even higher pedestal in terms of sports and entertainment because he's already a star. I mean, we're at the point now where celebrities name drop Conor McGregor left and right. I mean, Ben Affleck, he based his Batman fighting on Conor McGregor in the UFC. I mean, that's ridiculous. Think about that. To really reach that level, you know what I mean? Like, when you reach that kind of like pop culture relevance, you know what I mean? Because in boxing and mixed martial arts for years, it was Muhammad Ali was the guy. If you talked about boxing, it was Muhammad Ali. And then it was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was the guy. If you were talking about boxing, you were talking about Mike Tyson. Things like that. Right now, it's Conor McGregor, but he's going to take his relevance to a whole other level by fighting Floyd Mayweather. And also, if he can find a way to beat Floyd Mayweather, the amount of stardom he's going to have after that is ridiculous. And even on the flip side, if he just survives, if he goes 12 rounds, with arguably the greatest boxer of all time, or at least one of the greatest boxers of all time, that's a huge feather in his cap. He can say, I just stepped in my first day in this sport, and I went 12 rounds with one of the best ever. Now let me go back and beat up some of these MMA bums who have no business in the ring with me. All he really has to say after the fight, if he loses, is say, okay, Floyd, now you'll come fight me in the octagon and see how long you last. I mean, I guarantee you that's the kind of stuff he'll say. So This is the only way it goes wrong for Conor McGregor is if he loses so badly inside like the first 4 rounds. Outside of that, as long as he survives and he doesn't get knocked out, it's a win-win for him.
But I was going to say, and to that point, even if he does go in there, let's say he gets destroyed, even if he gets knocked out in the first round, which I don't think would happen, but let's say it does, do you think Conor McGregor's already won? I mean, you mentioned all these points about him being a pop culture icon and all these kinds of things, but if you know, really the aim of the game, a lot of people want to go in there and they want to win belts and claim titles. And really, I think a lot of that reason is so that once you win the belt and you get the title, you get the power, and then you get the money that comes with all that. Well, Conor's already conquered that. He's already got the belts. He's already proven himself. You know, they weren't, you know, it's not like he went from fighting undercard prelim UFC fighters to all of a sudden this position. You know, he won the featherweight belt, he won the lightweight belt, and sure, he never defended either belt, but now he's moved on to bigger and better things, and regardless, he's going to make so much money that he's never going to have to work a day in his life, even if he does get knocked out in the first round. Do you think we're all kind of missing the point? We're all kind of discussing, you know, does he have a shot? And no, he has absolutely zero chance. He's going to get embarrassed. But is it really even his goal? Like, I'm sure he's going in there, you know, I'm sure he doesn't want to go in there and lay an egg. I'm sure he's going to go in there and give it everything he's got. But was that really ever the point, whether he beats Mayweather or not? Was it really more about the money? And if that's the case, has he already won and won more than most fighters ever will?
Yeah, I mean, he has. Think about it. I mean, he's about to walk away with, from what I talked to Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports last week, because, you know, he's kind of more of a boxing guy than myself. Now, I follow boxing pretty closely, but not as much time as he spent. And I said, just kind of give me an idea. What do you think Conor will make off this fight? And he told me, you know, based on a percentage split kind of similar to what Pacquiao had, he would guess around 125 million. Wow. He's won. I don't care what happens. He makes 125 million. He won. Trust me. For 125 million, I'll go get knocked out. Anthony Joshua can come over to my house, punch me in the face right now, and I'll take $125 million for it. I don't care. So you're right. He's absolutely won this already.
Can I quickly bring something else into the fold that I haven't heard anybody really talk about? All right, let's say, because, you know, his chances of winning are really, really low, and I recognize that. But let's say somehow he is able to win this fight. Is he fighting for a chance to rematch Floyd Mayweather? Because if he does beat Floyd, if he beats Floyd somehow in this fight, and again, it's super unlikely, Floyd will probably win. But if he does beat Floyd here, I think it's very, very likely Floyd does a rematch to try and get that one back. What do you guys think?
100%. 100%. I actually said that to someone else. They said, what does Conor do if he wins? They said he walks back in there and makes 200 and some odd million off of Floyd Mayweather in the rematch. Because if he beats Floyd Mayweather, and again, I know we all say this seems unlikely and, you know, chances are it won't happen, but if he does, he is now the A side. He is now the guy demanding to Floyd, oh, by the way, now you're going to make 40%. And, you know, you're the guy that's going to be second on the pay-per-view. And you're going to come to the UFC and we're going to promote this fight. And you're going to give me the lion's share of the profits or whatever. His demands have to be met, because if he beats Floyd Mayweather, every possible card is in his corner and Floyd will have to cater to him. And then at that point, if he gives him the rematch, and they fight again, he's going to make, I mean, at that point, I said this earlier and I mean it. I say this. If the fight ends up being one of the biggest of all time, or the biggest of all time, if they break the Pacquiao record and it gets 4.7 or maybe 4.9 million or 5 million pay-per-view buys, and let's just say hypothetically Conor McGregor beats him, the rematch will be worth 6 million pay-per-views. And I'm not even kidding. It will blow that out of the water, because there's still going to be an element of fans right now who are saying, he can't do it. He can't really beat him, you know what I mean? And there's going to be a few people who will stay out of the spotlight and refuse to buy the show. But I guarantee if Conor McGregor beats him, if he knocks out Floyd Mayweather, every single person on earth that can afford that $100 pay-per-view will plunk down to watch it.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be like the Nate Diaz-Conor McGregor rematch, only times a million. But on that note, like, I'm honestly not expecting a whole lot from this fight. I don't want to be a downer, but I think a lot of people will end up buying it, obviously. But in terms of how many pay-per-views it'll get, will it break the Pacquiao-Mayweather record? There's a lot of theories. On one hand, you look at Mayweather being the pay-per-view king, and then what Conor McGregor has become. You look at two sports, the sport of boxing and the sport of MMA, sort of co-promoting in a sense and bringing both their fan bases. In theory, you would think it's going to be the biggest pay-per-view of all time. But then you also think about how many like you mentioned, Damon, the amount of boxing fans, the amount of purists, and even MMA fans who really begrudge this fight. You've got boxers, well-known boxers like De La Hoya coming out and basically encouraging people to boycott this fight. And I think there are a lot of people who won't buy it because they just see, look, this isn't going to be a real contest. There's nothing competitive about it. Whereas with Mayweather-Pacquiao, there wasn't anybody who really thought that. There wasn't anybody who thought, oh, it's going to go this way or it's going to one way. Everybody was curious about it, and it did bring a lot of MMA fans in there. So what do you guys think as far as how well it does in the pay-per-view? I'm curious what you think, Damon.
Well, I think it's going to break the record, and here's the thing. I hear what you're saying, and I hear what the fans are saying. I've had a lot of people hit me up on Twitter and say, I'm not buying this. This is a joke. This is a joke. But guess what's going to happen is you get closer and closer and closer to the fight. The press conferences start happening. The face-offs start happening. The talk starts happening. The weigh-ins happen. And then that Saturday night comes around, and you're going on Twitter, and you're going on Facebook, and you're talking to your friends, and everyone is talking about, I'm going to watch Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. I'm going to the bar to watch Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. I'm going to do this, and it's going to surround that. They don't want to be left out. What is this world that we live in now? We live in a world where we want to be part of a conversation. We want to be part of what's happening, right? What is going to be happening on that date in August? And it's that. Everyone's going to be talking about that moment. It's just like when a movie comes out, like when a big movie comes out, or for instance, award shows, you know what I mean? When there's the Oscars or the Emmys, all these people, I hate award shows. They're so dumb. But then when everyone starts tweeting about it and talking about it, everyone wants to join in the conversation. It's the same thing here, except on a steroid-like level, because everyone is going to be watching this, and you don't want to be left out. You don't want to be the guy who said, I hate this fight, it's a joke. And then Conor McGregor knocks out Floyd Mayweather. You missed it. You know what I mean? You're catching pictures and trying to find a GIF highlight of what happened. You want to watch it. So that's why I think it will break the record, because that curiosity factor is still going to draw in enough people to where they want to see it. And they may be complaining right now, and they may be making all the excuses in the world of why they're not going to watch. But at the end of the day, they don't want to be left out in the cold when it happens to either say, see, I was right. Floyd Mayweather outclassed him. It was a joke. This fight shouldn't have happened. I was right all along. Or they want to be the person who said, see, Conor McGregor shocked the world. He went out there and beat this boxing guy. He had no business in there with him. You know, that kind of stuff. They want to be part of that conversation.
100%, Damon. And just on that as well, a couple of more points there. I mean, they're building this undercard to, we don't know what the fights are going to be just yet, but it's going to be a very, very solid undercard with some really, really good boxers. So I think if you're a hardcore boxing fan, this is a card that you're going to want to watch. There's going to be a lot of great fights on there. It's like the equivalent of, a UFC 205 or something like that, where there's a bunch of great fights. Maybe the main event isn't really tickling your fancy, but you don't want to miss out on the spectacle. This is going to be a crazy event full of great fights, great big fights. Then the other thing that comes with it is, people, a lot of casual fans, the ones that I've been speaking to, and I've noticed as well online, there's been some posts about this. A lot of people are putting money on Conor McGregor. A lot of the casual fans that don't know much about boxing and sort of know a little bit more about MMA, a lot of them are going around talking about how Conor McGregor is going to do this, and it is because they're not very familiar with Floyd Mayweather. A lot of people aren't huge fans of Mayweather's fights. He's done really well pay-per-view-wise, but he's kind of been a natural heel for a really, really long time. A lot of people haven't been the biggest fans of the way that he fights. To them, this is almost like a WWE match where Conor McGregor is kind of like a face and Mayweather's kind of like a heel, and they want to see Conor McGregor go in there and destroy him. And a lot of people believe that he can. A lot of the casual people that don't really quite understand how it's going to go believe that McGregor has the ability to go in there and knock him out. But the question I have for you, Casper, is has the Mayweather promotions and have Showtime made a mistake here by not going with a theme and having more MMA versus boxing matches? Or were they smart to just stick to a pure boxing card to sort of lure in those hardcore fans that would be put off by the main event?
No, I don't think that anybody's going to be lured in by this undercard. I think it's going to be a very, very bare bones undercard, like pretty much all boxing undercards, and it's going to be filled with Mayweather fighters just so that they can get a little bit more extra exposure. It doesn't need an MMA versus boxing theme throughout the entire card for this to be a success. It's already going to be a success. I mean, we're talking here about it doing potentially more than 4 million pay-per-view buys. What would putting MMA fighters on this card do for those numbers? What, maybe add another 10,000 pay-per-view buys? No point. And it would be a huge detriment to the UFC because, you've got guys like Stipe Miocic, Cub Swanson talking about wanting to fight boxers on this card. The UFC needs those guys. They need a Stipe Miocic headlining pay-per-views. They need their UFC heavyweight champion. They need Cub Swanson looking good so that hopefully in the next 1 or 2 fights, he can be potentially fighting for the featherweight belt. If they go out here, get embarrassed potentially, which is a very real possibility, lose or get knocked out, and for what? It does nothing for the UFC. It's outside of UFC programming. It makes them look bad, and it takes them out of their schedule as well. If they go out and they get knocked out, that means they have to be on the sidelines. That means they have to get a brief suspension from the commission. That means they can't train, and that means they can't be ready for potential fights in the UFC. I mean, people are already complaining about watered-down cards in the UFC. They don't need to lose any more star power. Furthermore, these guys aren't Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is going to be a star regardless, win or lose. He's already a star. Guys like Cub Swanson, guys like Stipe Miocic, they don't have that high profile where if they go out and get knocked out, people will immediately forgive it. And I don't think this undercard is going to be any. You mentioned UFC 205. I don't think it's going to be anything like UFC 205. I think it's going to be incredibly bare bones. UFC 205 and UFC 200 last year were incredibly stacked cards from top to bottom. And guess what? They didn't outdraw cards like UFC 202 and UFC 196, which weren't as stacked. And the reason is because the rivalries at UFC 202 and 196 were driving those pay-per-view buys. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. You have likely an even bigger rivalry here with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. So there's no way they're going to stack the undercard in any way.
Yeah, I mean, the undercard, boxing undercards have traditionally just been, for the most part, kind of garbage compared to the main event. I mean, people pay for boxing to see that main event. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, they had Vasyl Lomachenko on the Pacquiao-Mayweather card, and looking back, you're like, wow, that's a pretty good fight. But at that point, Lomachenko wasn't the Lomachenko that he is today, to where he's one of the kind of up-and-coming real stars of boxing and has so much respect at the time. He was still kind of a bit of an unknown, at least. So they're going to fill it with a lot of Mayweather promotion guys that, Floyd wants to build up. But at the end of the day, no one's buying this card for the undercard. This isn't MMA where, they'll fill up an undercard with, 5 or 6 quality fights to where if the main event isn't great, you still feel justified in buying the card. This is all about McGregor and Mayweather. This is all about that. This is the Super Bowl. This is what people tuned in for. They didn't, as much as people say, I like the commercials and I like the halftime show, ultimately it's about the game. It's about what's happening in the Super Bowl. And yes, you will get those rare people who will say, man, I really want to see this undercard, or I'm really looking forward to everything else. But ultimately it comes down to the main event. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not surprised. I don't blame them for not doing MMA boxing crossovers, because it just takes away the attention from the main event, because then people are going to say, oh man, this is such a unique card. No one cares about the card. Everyone cares about Mayweather and McGregor. And ultimately that's what's going to bring in people's money. And that's what people are going to invest their $100 in, or $90,000 for a ticket. That's what they're going to see, is McGregor and Mayweather.
All right, well, let's talk about the build-up to this fight, because I almost feel like these press conferences and whatever they choose to do is going to be so important to the fight breaking that record, because that first time that Mayweather and McGregor have their stare down and have their press conference is really going to set a precedent of what we can kind of expect in the trash talk department leading into this fight. Now, the fight is happening quite soon. Both guys are training. From what I understand from listening to the MMA Hour, Owen Roddy and the team, they're going up to America in a couple of weeks and going to be training out of there. Damon, what kind of promotion do you think needs to happen to really push that fight over that record? Some people are talking about world tours. I think that's pretty unlikely at this stage with the fight being so soon. But what would you like to see happen in terms of promotion for this fight? And also, so far, Mayweather's been pretty respectful towards Conor McGregor. Do you expect him to change his stance, or do you expect him to sort of stay along the same line as we've seen him so far?
Well, as much as people are saying that the fight itself will be a mismatch, the verbal warfare would be a mismatch, because Conor McGregor will dice up and slice up Floyd Mayweather 10 times over when it comes to the verbal warfare. And everyone's going to say, well, Floyd's a good trash talker, and he picked apart Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya ain't Conor McGregor, okay? Conor McGregor. And so I think, they're going to do a press conference initially, from what I've heard, within the next week to 2 weeks, they want to put together a press conference. I don't think they can do a world tour, because simply said, there's only 2 months to go until the fight. And I think flying everyone to Ireland and flying them back to Vegas and all this stuff is a lot. But what I think they could do is potentially do like a three city tour, do Vegas, New York, and LA, or Vegas, New York and Chicago, or something like that. and promote the fight over about a 2-week span and do something like that, because the more they promote this fight in that realm of letting Conor go after Floyd, the bigger this pay-per-view is going to grow. Because for all the naysayers who are saying they're not going to buy this fight, they're saying they're not going to buy it because they don't believe Conor McGregor has a realistic shot of beating Floyd Mayweather. But Conor McGregor has an innate ability to make you believe in him by the things he says, by the things he does. And so him going out there, and I'm telling you right now, everything is going to be fair game. Floyd Mayweather's domestic violence history, the whole reading thing, he's going to go after him on a personal level, and it's going to get ugly. And I think that also may play a part in Conor McGregor's chance to win this fight, because his mental warfare is unlike anything we've seen in this sport. The only person he's never really gotten to has been Nate Diaz. Well, Floyd Mayweather's not Nate Diaz, and I think if there's a chance he can get into his head and make Floyd fight outside of himself, that's what this is about. So I think they need to do 2 or 3, maybe even 4 press conferences between now and August 26th and really build this thing up. Do one immediately, and then maybe do another one in New York or LA, and then do one more on Fight Week, of course, to really build this thing up, because Conor going after Floyd the way Conor will is only going to watch more and more pay-per-views come in, because as much as you may not believe he has a chance, him going out there and just absolutely demolishing Floyd Mayweather with his verbal assault is going to make a lot of people believe he can do it.
And I think it'd be a great thing to see, because if you do have these press conferences spaced out between a few days or maybe a week apart each, you're going to, everybody's going to tune into the first one. They're going to see the verbal warfare. Then if, for example, Mayweather gets wrecked by Conor McGregor, they're going to say, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in the next press conference. Mayweather and his team probably going to talk about, how can we get back at Conor McGregor and things like that. And it's going to escalate and escalate. But it kind of almost reminds me of UFC 202, where there wasn't really any buzz about it. Nobody was really caring until we had that press conference where the infamous bottle throwing incident, and then all of a sudden it became a light, and then it became the biggest UFC pay-per-view of all time. So I almost feel like this 3-city tour would be fantastic. It'd be ideal, but between the followers on Conor McGregor's Instagram and Twitter, and then Floyd Mayweather's, anything these guys say, anything these guys tweet is going to be news anyway. And the fact that this fight has already essentially been promoted by us, the media, and the fans, and all the theorists for the last almost year, it's like a big pile of gasoline. It's just waiting for a match to light up. I'm curious what you guys think, as far as we'll see what kind of press conferences and things we do. But what about the angle of this fight's been promoted on, specifically by Mayweather Promotions? Because thus far it's been super respectful, and it's almost unnerving. It's almost awkward how complimentary everybody has been of Conor McGregor. It's almost like we're getting the hard sell. We had Nate Jones speaking before, and you would think if you're in Mayweather's camp, of course you're going to take this seriously. Of course you're going to train hard for this fight. But that this is a very, very lopsided fight. But everybody is really selling Conor McGregor on having this massive chance, and saying that he's such a tough opponent, and we're worried about his power. And a lot of people buying into it, and a lot of people saying, well, Conor McGregor's got that power. And you think, well, hey, Canelo had power, Cotto had power, De La Hoya had power, and neither one of them could, connect hard enough or often enough to really hurt Floyd. What do you think about the way that this fight's been sort of promoted by Ellaby and Mayweather themselves?
I actually think, this is going to be a situation where they're going to switch up their strategy. That first press conference, because I know Conor McGregor, he's in a different mind of his own. We saw what he did when he tweeted out the fight was out. He put out that poster of him and Floyd's dad. I think he's on the right track. He knows he's going to be trash talking. He knows he's going to be bringing it at these press conferences. Until that first press conference happens, I don't think Floyd or his team are going to be doing much trash talking towards Conor. I think they're of that mindset that, let's make it seem like this kid's got a chance. Let's make it seem like we're taking him seriously. Let's make it seem like he's dangerous, because they think that's the best way to promote the fight, to kind of get all those boxing purists to buy. But I think after that first press conference, with all the trash that Conor McGregor throws at him, I think, Mayweather's going to have no choice but to throw trash back at him and realize, okay, this is going to be the way the fight's going to be sold. We don't have to sell people on the fact that McGregor's got a shot here at landing punches, or, that he's got a powerful left hand that could possibly knock me out. We don't need to do that. We can just go out there. We can do our thing. He can try and destroy me, and I'll try my best to go back at him. I mean, he understands that. We all saw he's worked with the WWE a number of times before. He's not the best trash talker, but I think once he gets it slung at him, there's no way he's going to sit there and just sort of take it and be respectful towards him. I mean, Damon, what's your stance on this? Do you actually think there's a chance the Mayweather team somehow stays respectful under fire from Conor McGregor through these press conferences?
Well, I think what we're more likely to see is in the beginning, like what Casper said. I think we're going to see a little bit of that in the beginning because they want to sell it that he actually has a chance, to win this fight. They want to sell it like he did against Andre Berto, who I have nothing but respect for him, but he really had no business being in the ring with Floyd Mayweather after he beat Manny Pacquiao. I mean, that was as much of a cakewalk as you could hand a boxer at that point as you could get. Andre Berto's a good mid-level guy, but he's definitely not on the level of a Manny Pacquiao or a Canelo or any of those guys. And Floyd did his best to build him up and say, this guy's a tough guy. He's this, he's that. And people saw right through it and basically, didn't end up buying the pay-per-view, even though it was Floyd's last fight. So I think in the beginning, he will go that route. He will say Conor's a tough guy. He's a knockout artist. He's going to say all the right things. And then Conor's going to say, did you actually come up with that? Or did someone have to tell you that? Because I know you can't read that off a cue card. And then he's going to say something else about domestic violence. I can't even predict what Conor's going to say. The point being is he's going to go after him. And at that point, what Floyd's never going to do is Floyd's never going to say he shouldn't be in this fight. Floyd's never going to say, you have no business being in here with me. None of that. All he's going to say at that point is I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to dice you up. I'm going to piece you apart. I'm going to make you look bad in there because he doesn't want to make people truly believe that Conor has no chance. He can't do that because that risks pay-per-views. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. So you'll see him do that at the beginning. And I think when you start seeing like the 24/7s or whatever they call those on Showtime All Access or whatever, you're going to start seeing him talking about, this is, Conor McGregor, and this is me hitting his head. This is me hitting that big melon head of his. And you're going to see him start trash talking that way, saying, I'm going to kick his ass. But he's never going to disrespect Conor as a fighter, because when you do that, when you go to the level of you don't deserve to be in there with me, then you take people's interest away because there's already that doubt of really, does he belong in there with you? So you're never going to hear him say that. He may just start saying the things like, I'm going to kick his ass. And then Conor, of course, will come back with something else because that's Conor McGregor.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into it a little bit here. Let's actually discuss this fight from a, what could happen perspective, because when we look at it from Floyd Mayweather's side, it's pretty clear what he's going to be doing. He'll be using his defensive boxing to wear Conor McGregor out, and then in the later rounds, we might even see him potentially go to possibly finish Conor and sort of pick him apart. But in terms of Conor McGregor and his game plan as to what he should be doing to possibly beat Floyd Mayweather, I'm just curious to hear what you guys think needs to be done. Damon, what is the blueprint to Conor McGregor possibly winning this fight?
Well, there's a couple things he can do to potentially win this fight, just from the long history I have of watching Floyd Mayweather. He needs to go after Floyd early. He needs to go out and really gun for that knockout in the first 5 rounds, because Floyd has traditionally had a bit of a slow start, and some of his fights, which ended up being a little closer early and then kind of went blown apart late, are fights where he allowed a guy to stick around early, and they were able to kind of give him some looks that maybe he hadn't seen before. Go back and watch the Zab Judah fight. He had a couple of early rounds there. Shane Mosley rattled him, I think, in the 2nd or 3rd round in their fight. Marcus Maidana really brought it to him early in their fight. So that's what Conor has to do. Conor has to go out there and really make this a dogfight early and not let Floyd get comfortable, and don't take away from the fact that Floyd has been off for 2 years and 2 years in retirement. I think that's a big factor for this fight, is that Floyd wasn't just gone for 2 years. He was gone retired. He was basically wrapped it up and said, I'm done fighting. And that's a different mentality than, somebody who's injured and is always, climbing and scratching to get back into the ring or back into the cage. Floyd hasn't had that mentality for 2 years. He's basically been sitting out enjoying life. So he's got to get back in that fight mode a little bit. So Conor needs to come after him hard and heavy in those early rounds and look for the knockout. He cannot go out there and try to outbox Floyd, because he will get absolutely picked apart. 110% confident he will get picked apart if he just goes out there and tries to outbox Floyd Mayweather, because you're not going to outbox him. No one is going to outbox him. Not Canelo Alvarez, not Gennady Golovkin. None of these guys are going to simply, quote unquote, outbox Floyd Mayweather. You have to go out there and beat him up and make it ugly and do what Marcus Maidana did. Marcus Maidana went out there with zero fear in that first fight, and he just went after Mayweather. He made it an ugly fight, and he ended up getting a majority decision, probably one of the closest times Floyd has ever had in his career, where he nearly lost. That's what Conor needs to do. Conor needs to pressure him. He needs to look for that left hand, and he needs to make it ugly early, because I think if this fight goes past like round 5, then it's all over.
I think that's a really solid. I think it's a really solid theory, and I agree with everything that you mentioned, Damon. I don't. In reality, I don't see it happening. I think that one thing we know about Floyd Mayweather is his insane work ethic. I mean, he has a lot of money, but he's worked for everything that he has, and I think that one of the biggest things that I agree with and sort of believe that Nate Jones said to us before is just about how serious they're taking this fight. Because let's be honest, everybody, I feel like a lot of the pressure is on Floyd Mayweather, because if he goes out and loses or if he gets embarrassed, oh my God, the domino effect of everything that's going to happen. I mean, hey, there's going to be a rematch, and that's going to be good for his wallet, but I think it would definitely hurt his legacy in a sense. So I think Floyd Mayweather's taking this extremely serious, and I think come fight night, he will be as ready as he's ever been. And I don't know, we saw Conor McGregor against Nate Diaz, and granted they're different fighters. Diaz is an MMA fighter. He's bigger than Floyd, but we saw how Diaz was able to, like we hear Owen Roddy go on the MMA Hour, and of course we respect the hell out of Owen, but he's talking about Conor McGregor's cat-like defenses. Nate Diaz isn't the fastest guy, and he was able to tag and hurt Conor McGregor. So I think that to all the people that are talking about Conor McGregor's left hand and his power, he has those things. He certainly has those things. I just don't think they're going to be a factor in this fight. I think that he's going to be throwing a whole bunch of punches. I think that he's going to be missing punches. And then I think as the fight plays on, people are going to be more and more disappointed. In fact, my personal hot take here, and look, I am excited for this fight. I'm excited probably for the festivities more than the fight itself. But, everyone's sort of giving their hot take. I think my hot take is that the best Mayweather-McGregor content and footage will actually all be free. The press conferences, the stare-downs, the media calls, the embeddeds, the 24/7s, the McGregor, Mayweather trash talk compilations and general ways of promoting the fight, the ridiculous articles from media outlets that have no clue about either boxing, MMA, the whole circus that you mentioned before, Damon. I think it is all actually going to be the best part of this, and I think the fight will probably not live up to a lot of expectations. That's my hot take. What do you think, Dennis?
I think the key here is, and I think, Damon, you mentioned it, and we were talking about these press conferences, is mentally, how much will Conor McGregor be able to affect Mayweather leading into this fight? Because to me, when this fight starts, I want to see McGregor taunting Mayweather. I want to see him try and get into his head. I want to see him be that McGregor that we've seen before in some of these successful fights, because he's got to keep Mayweather off his game. He's got to mentally try and affect him in this fight. He's got to start at the press conferences, and he's got to work his way all the way through to the fight. If he just comes forward at the beginning of the fight, I think that's predictable. I think that's what Floyd Mayweather and this camp are expecting. But I want to see him play a little bit with Mayweather. I want to see him try not to be too predictable in this first few rounds. Come forward, but still play around with him. Make fun of him a little bit in that ring. Just really try get in there mentally, because there's another factor that we're not sort of putting in here, and I don't know how many of these guys are going to be in the actual fight, because I saw the tickets are going to be between $2,000 and $90,000 if you want to attend. But the Irish fans, how many of them will be at these press conferences? How many of them will be at the fight itself? Because if you got Conor McGregor trying to clown Mayweather in the ring and at the press conferences doing all this stuff, and you've got all these Irish fans going crazy, even though Mayweather's been in the craziest fights of them all, he's been in there with Oscar De La Hoya and stuff like that. This could be a very, very crazy crowd at this event, and this could be a very, very crazy crowd all the way through this. I'm wondering how much of that might affect Floyd Mayweather mentally, and if that somehow can play into McGregor possibly having a better performance than if he just went in there straight and just tried to box him. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. Damon, I mean, I know you mentioned that you've booked your accommodation and your flight up to Vegas. I'm just curious, from a media perspective, I mean, as a media member that will most likely be attending this, what are you expecting from your end? Because, this may be one of the biggest events of all time. From your end, are you prepared for the craziness that you'll be dealing with being there on the day? And, this is boxing, this isn't MMA, so things are run differently in the boxing world.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've already spoken to Showtime, about attending the fight. I should be attending the fight. Luckily, the great thing about this fight is the people who run Showtime, their boxing division, are the same people who used to run Showtime Strikeforce. So luckily, I have a great relationship with the folks over there. I've met Steven Espinosa before, and their media team, and they're great guys. They know what they're doing. It's gonna be interesting, and it's gonna be really crazy. And I think it'll be very intriguing to see how the Conor McGregor show plays in the boxing world, because I think you are going to have a lot of crossover audience because, Conor attracts such a wide audience beyond just mixed martial arts, but you are going to have that mixed martial arts audience there. Like you said, those Irish fans at the press conferences and the weigh-ins. And we know that's a different crowd than typically attends a boxing match or what you see on TV for a boxing match. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, listen, we've all watched the Conor McGregor fights. We've been to Conor McGregor fights. We know what that show is like, and I think he's going to bring that show to town. It's Vegas. It's still very much, his home area. As much as that is Floyd's home, it's still a place that Conor McGregor has kind of made his secondary home compared to Ireland. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all plays out. It's going to be a show. It's going to be nuts. I'm excited about it. I'm sure it's going to be crazy. I'm sure it's going to be a lot of insanity that week with between, any kind of press conference or any kind of weigh-in or whatever happens. But I'm excited about it. As soon as I was able to book my flight to go out there, I was excited just because, I was there for, Diaz McGregor 1 and Diaz McGregor 2, and both of those were so insane, and just everything surrounding those fights was so nuts that I think that's going to be just like this, except, times 20. And I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be nuts, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to see how that MMA and boxing world kind of meld together for this fight, because I think it's going to be really interesting when everyone kind of gets together.
And I think while you're talking about MMA boxing, it's the perfect segue to what exactly happens next after this fight. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. The fight isn't even, well, I guess it kind of is on the horizon, but one of the biggest talking points also is what happens after this fight. If Conor McGregor goes out there and gets destroyed like a lot of people are predicting, does that... Because a lot of people are also saying that he'll never return. He'll never come back after this. And maybe that is true. Maybe if he makes all this money, that he'll essentially have, I guess, won the game. He'll do what he said before in 2014. Get in, get rich, and get out. But if he does go in there and get destroyed and wants to redeem himself, does that, I guess, add to the theory that maybe he will return by the end of the year, like Dana White is saying? What do you think, Damon? And also, how do you think this would affect him if he does go out there and get destroyed? I mean... MMA fans are still going to buy his pay-per-views, but do you think it'll help in any way? Do you think any boxing fans will come across? I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine seeing him get destroyed in boxing and have boxing fans say, hey, I want to see more of that. But do you think maybe because of the trash talk, maybe because of the pre-fight hype, people will say, you know what, I want to see this guy go in his own element? What do you think, Damon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the only way Conor doesn't come out of this looking like the smartest guy in the room is if he really does go in there and just gets absolutely destroyed inside of 3 rounds. Now, I don't think that'll happen, not because Floyd isn't a superior boxer. It's just because Floyd is not that kind of guy. Could he knock out Conor McGregor? Absolutely. It's boxing. It's fighting. Anything can happen. But typically Floyd's style is not tailored towards knockouts. That's just not what he typically has done. So, Conor McGregor, let's just say hypothetically he makes it 12 rounds. Let's say he loses all 12 rounds. It's a shutout. Still, he went in there and went with one of the greatest boxers in the world. I think he will absolutely return to the UFC where he can kind of reclaim his stake as the best fighter on the planet, because he can still hold that up high and say, you know what, Floyd beat me in a boxing match with rules. Now, come meet me in the octagon where there aren't nearly as many rules. Let's see how long you last. Because I think most people would agree Conor could potentially last 12 rounds with Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather would not last 1 round with Conor McGregor in a UFC fight, and he can always hold that up after the fight is over. So I think if he loses, he comes back to the UFC and he fights somebody. Now, I don't know who that's going to be, if it's going to be Tony Ferguson, if it's going to be Khabib Nurmagomedov, if it's going to be the Nate Diaz trilogy, which I still think is probably the most likely scenario because it would still be the biggest fight possible for him. I think that happens. Now, if he wins, as I already said, they're going to do a rematch. He's going to make $250 million. And at that point, I don't think he ever comes back again, because if he beats Floyd Mayweather and then gets an automatic rematch where he is going to be making the lion's share of the money, then there's no way he's coming back, because what do you really gain at that point? What is going to be bigger than those 2 moments in your career? So that's how I see it playing out. And considering most people believe Conor's going to lose, I think that's just an automatic pass for him to come back to the UFC and kind of reestablish himself as the man.
Well said, Damon. I mean, how could you not finish on a thought like that? I agree with you, by the way. I think if he loses, he goes back to the UFC. There's still a lot of money to be made there. And that is the end of the program. A big thank you to Damon Martin for coming on. Guys, make sure to check him out on Twitter at Damon Martin, his work on Fox Sports, Nerdcore Movement. The guy is an absolute beast and puts out awesome content every single day. We also want to thank Michael Johnson, Nate Jones, and Chris Cyborg, and Sean Sheehan for coming onto the program this week. What a fun show, Cass. I mean, so much fun this week, so much to talk about. We want to thank all of you for tuning in, and of course, we'll catch you guys with another episode next week.